Guess who's back? And guess who got her glow back after quitting caffeine cold turkey? Feeling like a 100-year-old slut for 2 weeks. Not slut, sloth. I'm still working on the sound, okay? Not even a year ago I was talking like, happy birthday, I think we have to go that way. So put a little respect on it, okay? At least I'm showing up for the English folks. Because in my own country they speak the same words but not the same language. How late do you think? Why do I act like I have a watch? Showtime. Anyways, this is all my own energy, no artificial. Only people that saw the last video will understand this. My God. I already need a coffee break from the intensity of being me. Okay, cut it out, do normal. Why am I dragging this? Let's get into it. Okay, cut it out. Anyways, nuance, let's get into it, because I've been thinking about this word a lot lately. Nuance is what separates wisdom from ideology. Nuance is what gives us the ability to hold more things at once without collapsing into black and white thinking, which I was an absolute star in back in the days when I was young. Because it creates this false sense of safety. But it has little to do with wisdom or intelligence, if you ask me. Who asked that? But instead of constantly needing something or someone to be fully right or fully wrong, good or evil, healed or broken, you start seeing systems, layers, contradictions, timing, deeper meanings, biological mechanisms, pain, projections, and truth existing simultaneously, being able to hold both paradox and interconnectedness without losing yourself in consistently needing more information before you are able to do that. That is what eventually creates more clarity. That is what changes everything. I think one of the biggest problems in the world is this black and white thinking when it comes to everything, but also things like manifestation, spirituality, trauma, identity. Real wisdom to me increases your ability to hold complexity. It is integrated understanding. It is the ability to hold multiple truths at the same time without losing yourself in confusion. Because after awakening, peeling back the layers of all that you are not, comes interpretation of all that you are and all that you are observing. And without nuance, healing, spirituality, manifestation, self-development can become another identity prison. Dat moeten we niet hebben. That is why I felt that this episode was important after remembrance, because remembrance without nuance can distort people's relationship with their own power, spirituality, their ego, responsibility, and even their own humanity. Especially online, people tend to swing from one extreme into the other. So that's why in this episode I'm going to talk about nuance. I already started to talk. About navigation, about how to hold your own remembrance without losing your own humanity. Because a lot of people are trying to heal while they are still fighting parts of themselves. I used to fight myself and call it discipline. I used to call parts of myself pathetic, weak, low vibrational. I think people get lost because a lot of people sell the idea that Things like alignment, purpose, spirituality, healing, manifestation will eventually remove the human condition, but they don't. Now, will they reduce unnecessary suffering, create more coherence, make life more meaningful, help you stop abandoning yourself, improve your relationships, your business, direction, your health? Absolutely. But they do not magically cancel out the 3D inconveniences. Uncertainty, nervous system struggles, grief, hormones, fear, business pressure, just being human, weet je wel? Hoe heet het wel? Versta jij niet, hè? Nee? Dacht ik al. Sometimes we pray for the disappearance of struggle. Well, what we really need is to build capacity, structure, resilience, support. Don't ask for life to be easier. Ask for the courage and the strength to follow through when life and holding things with nuance asks a little more of you. Only the real ones know where this is from. But the fact is that a seed still needs water. Your system still needs regulation. A business still needs systems. A body still needs nourishment. A wounded pattern still needs repetition to unwind. Accepting and allowing your humanity does not cancel out spirituality. It is what grounds it in reality. Even when we know ourselves deeply, we will still experience pain. It's just that we stop choosing abusive relationships, abandoning our truth, or doing things just for validation. Stop building lives that suffocate us. Stop abandoning our body. Stop falling apart every time that life becomes uncertain. That's self-mastery. That's living in coherence. Before I understood this, all I was doing was fragmenting myself even more. Because healing approach without nuance becomes war against the self. And manifestation without nuance becomes obsession, performance, frustration, endless chasing. You gotta be kidding me. To be honest, the only reason that I use the word manifestation is so that people know what I'm referring to. Other than that, I think the word has become a distraction from doing the deeper work of going within. Manifestation is like breathing. You can't stop it, but you can learn the mechanisms so you can learn to work with it in favor of yourself. But forced manifestation is a coping mechanism. It's a desperate state in hopes to gain back control over your life. And in that process, you are consistently focusing on what it is that you don't have, which results in the sub-creation of a reinforced reality where you are not able to experience what it is that you want. Because all we are manifesting is ourselves. The relationship that we have with ourselves. The way we relate to truth. The way we relate to life. Trying to get things outside of you to finally feel something inside of you, or do I say within you, is violence against your own agency, your own inner power. Why? Because it works the other way around. You have to acknowledge yourself here. Come on now. It is feeling, being attracting. It comes from the inside out, not the other way around. And we all know this, but in some kind of way, it's still very difficult to difficult to comprehend. No comprende. And if you even want to peel it back further, until its core simplicity, it is being. Daar schijnen we nogal wat moeite mee te hebben. And even there, nuance is needed, important. Because I don't believe you constantly have to be in the perfect frequency to get what you want out of life. But you have self-certainty without self-awareness, and you have self-awareness without self-certainty. That is the quick calculation that I have to make in my head when defining the bottleneck. I've met plenty of people that are low vibrational, full of shit, and still get what they want out of Sorry guys, oh my god. It's getting late. I've met plenty low vibrational people that are full of shit, and they still get exactly what they want. It's their conviction that makes the difference. And from that space they make decisions. They have simply decided that they are allowed to have what they want, and they move accordingly. The certainty, the whole story doesn't matter, but the certainty comes from the fact that their behavior is aligned with their self-concept, the way they see themselves. Within psychology, they call that ego syntonic. And if that self-concept is healthy or not, that's another conversation. Another time, okay? So if there is something that you deeply want, but you don't have yet, there's often a deeper conviction underneath it that says that you are not allowed to have it, that you can't have it, that you first have to be more lovable, that you have to heal more first, that you first have to become more worthy. That's why I personally had to do a lot of inner work, uncovering the deeper clues. Those things, when found and pulled out from the root, often remove a situation where you feel like struggling in different areas of your life. In the end, you are the one that is unconsciously deciding that you don't have the right to experience certain things unless you follow a set of internal rules. It's a mindfuck, to be honest. But you only have to get yourself into the habit of consistently asking yourself, is that actually true? Is this actually true? What am I observing here? What am I still in agreement with? Zip it. Be still. Look around you. Observe. Be honest. I recently came to a big realization that I'm still chewing on. Kijk maar. That I will share with you soon. I feel like this is really going to put things into perspective. Because if you don't understand this from the inside out, you can spend your entire life chasing something externally that was always rooted in the relationship that you have with yourself. This is where nuance becomes important again, because we are certainly not going to lock ourselves back into the past. But we can also not deny, ignore how we've entered this realm. Things that we had to move through before we started remembering again. Remembering what? Dat mag jij vertellen. Because yes, at some point, self-responsibility becomes the only doorway out. That is the mirror that everyone talks about. But pretending that a child consciously created violence, emotional abuse, neglect, addiction, and nervous system conditioning, or abandonment from a fully aware place, that is oversimplification disguised as empowerment. A human always first adapts before they remember. So we have to go through that process fully. You as a child do not enter with full awareness over your consciousness, your nervous system, your identity, your coping mechanisms or environment. That's why it's such a vulnerable and critical time in our lives, where you absorb, mirror everything around you, where your consciousness is still forming. You are not responsible for everything that happened to you. It's just that at a certain point, you are responsible for what continues to move through you. That's a very different message than you have created all this. One creates shame and the other creates agency. It's a simple distinction that matters deeply, because most people first need deeper truth before they can access true empowerment. If we shove empowerment through the throats of people without acknowledgement, it can feel invalidating, even emotionally violent, especially for people that never have been witnessed and held in their pain in the first place. And this is also where I think that a lot of people get trapped in healing, because they confuse acknowledging pain with identifying as pain. Those are two different things. Acknowledging darkness is not the same as becoming the darkness. A lot of people are terrified that if they fully acknowledge the pain of certain experiences, that they will get trapped in victimhood forever. But suppression is not transcendence. Pretending that something didn't deeply affect you doesn't make you free from it. Usually, it just drives it deeper into the nervous system. At the same time, staying intertwined and fused with the story forever also traps people. See? Nuance. So the real power becomes, this happened, this shaped me in many ways, but it does not have to become the final altar of my identity. That is where remembrance begins. That is where agency begins. We are the meaning makers, the sub-creators, the alchemist. We have the ability to alchemize the raw material that has been given to us. So what do we create with that has been given to us, even when we didn't ask for it? And this is also why I don't believe in making an enemy out of our old self, out of old parts of ourselves. I think our whole purpose is to remember who we are. And to remember, we must forget. Remember why we are here. To know and discover all parts of the self, and approach them with the nuance, the respect, and the honor that they deserve. It's just an experience of peeling back the layers, getting to the root of all that you are. A lot of self-development language is turning parts of the self into something evil. Your old self that is holding you back on purpose. Your lower frequency is out here trying to keep you small. The old self isn't some demonic force. It is a structure built around the misunderstanding of who you really are. Most of these patterns were very intelligent adaptation strategies. Not always healthy long term, no, but adaptive. And based on the situation and the capacity that you had at the time. Hypervigilance may have protected you from chaos. People pleasing may have preserved attachment, which creates a feeling of safety when you haven't found that in yourself yet. Binge eating or emotional eating may have prevented some kind of overwhelm. Staying invisible may once have reduced danger. So, a helpful conclusion is usually not this evil part of me wants to ruin my life, but rather my system learned a way to survive before it knew how to feel safe. Another way to stay alive, basically. We can't blame ourselves for that. We can't blame parts of ourselves for that, for wanting to keep us safe and alive. It has the best interest. It's just not in a helpful way. And at the same time, it is a catalyst to learn, to teach us how to find a home within ourselves. Because through all the ways that don't work, we will eventually find ways that do work. If we listen. Because the decisions from the past, they don't matter. The future is solely determined by how we choose to think in the present. And I say think because it's the thinking that creates the doing and blah, 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 blah. Why I have to say it like that? Because it's all already been said a lot. But that means that we can now stop with approaching ourselves through shame and punishment. Now, does that mean that we are going to romanticize self-sabotage? No. Absolutely the fuck not. It also doesn't mean that we are coddling ourselves through destructive behavior, but the way we approach those parts matters deeply. And many people confuse them, but self-hatred and self-responsibility are not the same thing. The system prefers what is repeated and familiar over that what is healthy. When an identity is created, it prefers continuity. Difficult word. Continuity. Continuity. How do I say that in my own language? Continuïteit. Even in my own language, it's difficult. But when you have created an identity, it wants to continue existing. Not because it's evil, but because it's alive. It's the same when someone is drowning and that person is pulling you down. It doesn't have any evil intent. It just wants to stay alive. But with knowing that, you now know that you have to be thoughtful with your approach. The brain preserves energy through repetition. That is why we can all drive without thinking about it after we've learned it. But that's also the reason that old patterns can still feel convincing, seductive, overpowering, even after deep awakening experiences. Within that process, we also have to stay awake to the fact that just awareness isn't enough. We have to keep exposing ourselves to new experiences, to override the old files, so to say. Let's start with fully allowing ourselves to accept that we matter no matter what. Healing should not become an extended war against the self. Because war against the self creates more division, more fragmentation. A more nuanced, integrated perspective that we can hold is to thank all parts of ourselves that were leading us when we didn't yet know a better way, while at the same time also acknowledging that some of those parts are not qualified to lead our next chapter. That to me is mature self-leadership. Not killing, rejecting, or ignoring parts of the old self, but also not keep coming up with excuses to defend the parts that are now standing in the way of our growth. Reassigning them, fully integrating them. That is how we stabilize remembering who we really are. That is the exact reason that the work that I do is not about doing more or being more. It is about descending in the truth of who you are, realigning with the truth of who you are so you can ascend into what you are here to embody. It's about uncovering the essence beneath conditioning, the distortion patterns that were formed through adaptation and restoring coherence with that, what has always been true. Because only when you return to who you are can you fully ascend into what you are here to embody, into the most highest and truest expression of who you are. There are so many layers to the human complexity that first need to be acknowledged with honor, with understanding, with nuance. The moment when I could really do that for myself, offer that to myself, was where I no longer felt like parts of me were together in a group chat, where no one really liked or understood each other. I no longer felt the need to constantly pick myself apart and overanalyzing why I couldn't get myself together. Because we can intellectually wake up to all kinds of ideas, power, identity, manifestation, spirituality, consciousness, but without nuance, we can accidentally create distortion, inflation, bypassing shame, spiritual ego, internal war, confusion. Nuance is what brings back the balance. It's what stabilizes and grounds our wisdom into lived reality. Wisdom is integrated understanding put into practice. And sometimes we simply can't solve practical issues with spiritual solutions. I've tried. The ability to hold complexity and life with nuance, to me, is one of the biggest difference between people that just repeat practices and teachings and people that truly understand themselves and life. People who can stay present long enough to see what is true instead of rushing into conclusions in order to escape psychological discomfort. So maybe the deeper path is about holding things with compassion without removing agency, holding responsibility without shame, spirituality without dissociation from the wholeness of life, healing without self-rejection, remembering of the self without ego inflation, the acknowledgement of your nervous system and biological reality without becoming trapped in a victim identity. Because your body is real, conditioning is real, distortion patterns are real, your experiences, even though temporary, are real. Kom nou. We don't want to deny our wounds, but we also don't want to become them. Or am I alone in this? Come on, back me up. Luckily, there's a third path. There's a third path. You wanna know? Observing consciously, witnessing ourselves honestly, metabolizing, acknowledging, and embracing our inner truth without building our identity around suffering. That's the path that I took. That is where we reclaim our own power. And I think that that's the nuance.